Welcome to session 252 of the Bible in a Year commentary. If you started this series on the 1st of January, then today should be the 9th of September. Today we'll be looking at Matthew 21 to 22 and Psalm 97. But so far in Matthew, we've read through the prologue and the first 4 blocks of Jesus' ministry. Matthew opens with the genealogy and the story of Jesus' birth, both rooting Jesus in Old Testament prophecy and allusions. He's a descendant of David, born through the Holy Spirit, a king and the Son of God. He's given gifts from wise men that match what was given to Solomon's temple, God's presence on earth. He is brought out of Egypt as a new Israel. The first block of Jesus' ministry involved preparation, demonstrations, and teaching. After being baptized and affirmed by God, Jesus resisted temptation in the desert for 40 days. He chose his first disciples and then declared the kingdom of heaven was at hand. He went on to heal the sick, cast out demons, and then explain the kingdom of heaven in the Sermon of the Mount, similar to Moses on Mount Sinai. Jesus began with Beatitudes, emphasizing inward heart attitudes over outward behavior. He taught genuine faith, prioritizing God's kingdom over power, money, or self-reliance. He advised self-reflection before judging others, treating others as one wishes to be treated, judging others by their actions while assessing ourselves by our relationship with God. Then came the second block of Jesus' ministry, the kingdom of heaven applied to people's lives. We read a total of 10 miracles, mostly focused on people who were outcasts and those far from God. The kingdom of heaven brought them healing and freedom. The teaching of this second block then focused around how the disciples would bring this kingdom of heaven to others. The cost would be high, they would be persecuted and reviled, but if they trusted in God, he would give them the authority that they needed. The third block of Jesus' ministry focused on responses to him. John the Baptist doubted if Jesus was really the Messiah. The Pharisees challenged Jesus even after witnessing his miracles, and Jesus couldn't perform any miracles in his hometown due to their unbelief. During this phase, Jesus taught in parables, which are intentionally cryptic. Parables compels those who are interested in God to seek answers, while deterring those disinterested, naturally filtering out those who wouldn't follow Jesus even if they understood. The fourth block of Jesus' ministry focused on further revealing his identity and subverting expectations. He fed 5,000 people, echoing Moses. He walked on water, showing his divinity, and he healed and fed 4,000 Gentiles, showing his mission was for all people, not just the Jews. Jesus accused the Pharisees of prioritizing tradition over God's law. Peter recognized Jesus as the Messiah, but then Jesus clarified he was also the suffering servant. On a mountain, Jesus met Moses and Elijah, and God affirmed Jesus as his son. Then we got the fourth block of teaching, further reinforcing the upside-down nature of the kingdom of heaven, all while Jesus moved closer to Jerusalem. He emphasized humility, removing temptation, and including others. Offenses should be addressed with love and forgiveness, and heart issues should be the focus in a marriage. A young man asked Jesus how to enter heaven, and Jesus advised him to follow the commandments and give away his wealth. Jesus went on to teach that one cannot pursue both wealth and God, humbling the disciples who had given up everything. He shared again that he was going to Jerusalem to die, and then reiterated that greatness in his kingdom comes from serving others, not seeking power. Let's jump in with today's reading, Matthew 21 to 22. Jesus has now arrived at Jerusalem, which brings us to the final block of Jesus' ministry. This block is focused on the clash between the kingdom of heaven and the authority of the religious leaders. It follows the version of events we found in Mark 11 to 12 pretty closely, with a few extra parables. When a new leader or king takes the throne, they will often enter the city with a great procession. Jesus' entrance looks a little different. He gets his disciples to collect a donkey and her colt and bring them to him. He then rides into Jerusalem on that donkey. Matthew links this to the prophecy found in Zechariah 9 verse 9. In Zechariah, the future king is entering the city on the back of a donkey, here to bring peace. The crowd surrounds Jesus, celebrating his entry as the future king. They call out to him, the Son of David, shouting, Hosanna. Hosanna is a difficult word to translate, but has connotations of salvation. The people clearly believe that Jesus has come to save them from oppression. Upon entering the city, Jesus goes straight into the temple to cast out all those who had been selling there. He is asserting his authority as the future king to bring in God's kingdom and presence. Jesus no longer recognizes the authority of the religious leaders. To further demonstrate his authority to do this, he then invites all the blind and lame forward so he can heal them. The next morning, Jesus sees a fig tree, but as he gets closer to eat some of the figs, he realized that it hadn't produced any fruit. So he goes on to curse the tree and it withers. This may seem strange to us, but this was a prophetic act referring to Israel. Multiple times throughout the prophets, Israel were associated with a fig tree that bears no fruit. See Micah 7 verse 1 to 6 and Jeremiah 8 verse 13. Jesus is demonstrating that judgment on Israel for not being the people God had called them to be. When the disciples are amazed at how quickly the fig tree withered, Jesus uses this as a teaching opportunity to explain to them again the power of faith. Some religious leaders come up to Jesus and challenge him, asking by what authority he does all these things. Jesus tricks them by asking them what authority did John the Baptist do his works. He knew that the religious leaders would be trapped, because either way they answered, they would lose. Jesus then uses 3 parables to explain the situation to them. The first is of 2 sons, one who was all talk and no action, and the other one who said he wouldn't do what he was told, but then eventually does. The religious leaders are all talk, no action, while these sinners that Jesus deals with are actually turning back to God. The second parable is adapted from one we saw in Isaiah 5, verse 1 to 7. A master rents out his vineyard to some servants and then goes away for a while. A little later he sends some servants to collect his rent, but they are all beaten or killed. Eventually he sends his son, and the tenants kill him too. Familiar with this parable, the religious leaders point out at that point the master would just kill the tenants and get others to replace them. Jesus then deftly points out that is exactly what is happening. The religious leaders are the original tenants, ignoring all the signs that God has given them. So God will take away all their authority and give it to others who will use it to give God glory and produce much fruit for his kingdom. The third parable is similar to the second. In this situation, a king is holding a wedding feast for his son and invites a load of guests. But when the time came, many of the guests ignored the summons, and some even killed the servants that came to invite them. So the king has these guests killed and opens the invitation up to everyone. But when the king arrived at his own wedding feast, he saw a man who had come back but hadn't dressed appropriately. So the king had him killed too. Jesus is saying that while the kingdom of heaven is now open to everyone, it still requires an appropriate response from each individual. Someone can't spend their entire lives living however they want and then rock up to the kingdom of heaven expecting to get it. But the religious leaders aren't finished. They continue to try to trap Jesus. The Pharisees go first and ask him whether it's appropriate to pay the emperor his taxes. They hope to trap him because if he says yes, then all the people would be mad that he's loyal to the very empire they were expecting him to overthrow. But if he says no, then they can hand him over to the authorities for inciting people not to pay their taxes. But Jesus sidestepped them by pointing out that coins all had the emperor's face on, so they could just give to the emperor what is his and to God what is God's. Next up are the Sadducees, who don't believe in the resurrection. And so these guys try to trip Jesus up over that. They give the example of a woman who married 7 times because all her husbands die, and ask who she would be married to when they all get resurrected. Their logic is that the system makes no sense, therefore the resurrection can't be real. But Jesus points out that their logic is flawed because they don't understand the resurrection. People won't be married once they are resurrected. He then points out that by their own language, God has to be the God of the living, not the dead. So why would he not want to bring people back to life? The Pharisees then come again, asking what is the greatest commandment, hoping for some kind of slip-up that they could use against Jesus. But again, he deftly summarizes all the commandments by saying love God and love people. Jesus then challenges the Pharisees. In their mind, they had assumed that the Christ, the future king, was just a human descendant of David. But Jesus points out that if this is the case, why does David refer to this future king as Lord? In that case, it seems like the future king is more than just human, he is divine. But that is Matthew 21 to 22. Now let's look at Psalm 97. This psalm is not attributed to anyone and falls into the category of praise psalm. It is part of a small collection of psalms, Psalm 93 to 99, that focus on God as king. Here is a summary of the structure, but I would recommend checking out the written version of the commentary in the description to see the structure properly for yourself. We start with verses 1 to 5, the Lord reigns in power. Verses 6 to 9, he is above all other gods, and then verses 10 to 12, hate evil and rejoice in God. The psalmist starts with the declaration that the Lord reigns. He reigns supreme in the clouds and the storms. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of his reign. He controls fire and lightning, and even great mountains melt before him. The heavens themselves proclaim his righteousness and glory. So much so that anyone who worships anything else should be put to shame. The Lord is so much greater than all other gods. Those other gods should be worshipping him. This is why the people of Jerusalem and Judah rejoice, because they know their God is greater than all other gods. And so the psalmist encourages those who love the Lord to hate evil. He is a God that preserves those who keep themselves holy and saves them from the wicked. He provides light to guide these righteous ones and joy to lift their hearts. So rejoice in the Lord, stay righteous, and give thanks to God for his goodness. The psalm focuses on God's might and ability to defeat the other gods. No other holds the right to reign like he does, and so in response we should pursue righteousness, for he is a God of righteousness. Thanks for joining us today. Take a moment to reflect on what you've read and share your thoughts or questions below. If you're watching in the future, then you can click here for the next session, or you can find the full playlist just down here. To receive these daily commentaries in your email inbox, subscribe via the link in the description below. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.